Without vision, the people perish. Vision is a God-given thing, and it can be an extremely powerful thing. But at the same time, vision gets misconstrued in society and in business and entrepreneurship, in that it's a vision of what we want. Empire is self-focused. Kingdom is Christ-centered. When you make it about you, it will not be blessed.
You can keep doing what you want to do. If you want to keep building your empire, by all means, keep doing it. I'm not going to protect you anymore. Mm-hmm. And the entropy of the world will just wipe it away. And the world does what the world does.
You're focused on what you want. You're not thinking about God's kingdom.
Yeah.
You're not thinking about others who need help. You're not finding a way to be meaningful and purposeful with your time and your space. Your Creator has a vision and a plan, and He has a purpose and a place for you in that, but it's not about you. Welcome to the Built to Lead podcast. It's been a while, hasn't it, Tyler?
Yes, it's been quite a few months.
I don't know if it has been 6 months.
I think
it's been at least 6 months.
Yeah, we had a lot banked. So
yeah, so we let it, I guess, maybe it hasn't been 6 months since we've released one, but we banked some up before that.
Yeah.
It's been a crazy season around here, which is why I kind of brought that up, is our organization acquired and integrated 4 other companies over the course of the last 24 months. And so it has been a lot, I will say gently, on top of the economic challenges and things that we faced in the last little while.
There's a few things going on in the world.
There's a few things going on in the world, some world wars, some tariff stuff that's happened, challenges all around. So I've been very busy with that and not always in the right headspace to think up content and have conversations, but we're going to try and get kind of back into that here now as things kind of calm down until I uncalm them down again. But as my self-control is currently strong, I have time for podcasts.
Awesome.
Cool.
Let's get after
it.
Okay,
this week's topic. It's a topic I've actually had for a long time that I've wanted to talk about. But I was kind of formulating my whole thought process on it. Sometimes I need time to ruminate on a concept before I want to deliver my overall thoughts. But today's podcast will be called Kingdom versus Empire.
All right. Sounds good.
It's good. It's, in previous podcasts, I know I've talked about a kingdom mentality or kingdom thought process, about stewardship versus ownership. It's kind of similar to that, but I wanted to kind of show the differences between the two and the outcomes between the two, and how it points to how we lead in Built to Lead. And in Built to Lead, we're building and we're leading. And so as we're leading and building things, it's like, okay, but why are we building what we're building, and why are we building toward it, and how does that affect how we lead?
Yeah, it sounds good.
So I recently read a book by Oz Guinness called Calling, and he had a few statements in there that were really impactful to me. The first one that I wanted to touch on is, God will not bless the advancement of any other kingdom than his. So
I like that quote, but it makes me think like I know that there's a lot of wealthy people in the world.
Mm-hmm. So, that appear to be blessed or expanded.
They may even use the language of being blessed.
Yeah, and despite being an empire and not a kingdom, or building it selflessly for the kingdom of God.
Okay.
So we're going to touch on that today, not just yet. We're going to dig into that in a couple of minutes, but I'm going to go through a couple of empire builders and how that went for them and how it ended for them, and then I'm going to go through some kingdom builders, a little bit more to the biblical side of things, and I'm going to point out how that went and ended for them, and the differences between the two. But it really impacted me because as we build here, I know a lot of people use the word or the language of building an empire. A lot of coaches and leaders and other businesses in the world are building an empire, and that is actually like a language that's looked upon positively by the world.
Absolutely.
Like you're touted as something special if you're building an empire, whether it be for yourself, for your family, for a purpose that you've created. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's God's purpose in our lives, and I'm going to point out why that is.
Okay.
Another line from the same book from Oz Guinness is he says, maybe a little out of context, but performing before an audience of one. And what he means by that is that the reason that we exist and the reason that we perform and why we do what we do shouldn't be for other people or for the world's sake or for other reasons other than for our creator. Our creator is the audience that we perform for. And it also impacted me greatly in just how I felt and think about why I do what I do each day. I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone other than God. I'm not even trying to prove to myself.
Yeah.
Right. And so that we have to always question our motives and our drivers to make sure that we're not being driven by things that aren't our creator and our purpose.
So I'm noticing so all our other podcasts, it's not that we've shied away from the kingdom. It's not that we shied away from religious topics or religious aspects of what we talk about. But we haven't focused it. This feels like it's more focused towards a certain mindset. And is this purposeful or?
Yeah, I don't think I can talk about this topic without talking about faith. And I think it goes down really more deeply into the reason why I do what I do and why I lead the way I lead. And so that's why I want to share it. There's probably some similarities in the conceptually to our stewardship versus ownership. Podcast is a lot more faith-based in this conversation today. But that's fine because that's who I am and that's what I believe. And awesome. And the people who are going to listen to this, I believe, are going to benefit from that at the end of the day. It's the way I do it. And if you're trying to learn from what I think and what I do, this is what I think and what I do.
Amazing.
And I don't really want to mince words about that ever. Right. So what and why does this matter? Or what is it exactly that we're getting at? So the difference between kingdom and empire is that leaders and builders, as humans, we're going to naturally drift to selfishness. It is just our bent as humans. And so when we're building something, even if we start out with altruistic purposes or thought process, we're focusing on kingdom, we tend to always drift towards empire. We put ourselves at the center instead of Christ at the center, which requires us to constantly go back and rechurn through that all the time. And it's something that I'll say I have to do very, very frequently, because when you're just trudging ahead and going ahead and being disciplined and banging the gong of building and growing and personal development and everything else, you just keep getting routed back off track into that track. Is that it's about you. Everything in the world points you back to yourself. You're measuring what you're accomplishing, you're measuring your discipline, you're measuring your output, you're measuring your happiness, you're measuring all of these things, and it's you. Personal development is always about you, your person. And you can get, I don't think that personal development is a bad thing, but I think the reason why we're doing it needs to come up, because it eventually spirals into something unhealthy.
Yeah, the motivation.
The motivation is, so empire is self-focused. That's the language of it. Kingdom is Christ-centered and Christ-focused. And that's what we want to talk about here today, is the difference between the two.
So it's a distinction of motivation.
Yeah, or just understanding that I'm going to get drugged toward that, and that I need to continually intentionally push myself back into the reason why I'm doing things. I think every entrepreneur that builds, or every person that leads, has a lot of moments of, why am I doing this? I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of this. And when we get to that point, you can almost always realize, if you really get deep into it, that it's because you become self-focused. Why am I doing this? Why do I feel this way? Why am I not enjoying this? All these types of things. Well, it's because you're starting to really fully think about yourself and your purposes and your outcomes and things that you want, instead of the impact that you're having outwardly, right? And the impact that it's having on others, and the real altruistic or the purposeful things that you're creating. So, yeah, difference. That's what it was. The empire trap. So, there's, I'm going to get into more biblical stories later, but I think it's really interesting when you go through kind of like the Old Testament, all the different kings of Israel, and because they're very short and quick blips, but basically this king, he reigned for this long, he did this and this, he pissed God off. and he, his empire was crushed and destroyed, or sometimes it did good, or sometimes it didn't. But the distinction that it made biblically is, did that king, did that person follow God's precepts and honor God with the kingdom that he led and built, or did he honor himself? Right. And that's really like, the simple perspective is, was he about what God wanted, or was he about what he wanted and what served his flesh? And so it's just like bouncing back and forth. And I don't even know, I should have looked up how many different kings there were, but there were less than a handful really of all, whether it be 50 or 100 or whatever. There were 2 or 4 that God like said were honoring to him and that were men after his own heart, or that God appreciated how they went about it. So few, right?
Yes.
And I think it's the same with leaders in our world right now. There's so few that are actually out doing and building what they're doing for the good of others and not just for their own benefit.
Yeah. And they self-justify. They justify the bad things that they're doing.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, I need to be in power so I can do the good things. So I'm going to compromise on all these things so that I can do the good things.
Well, and these people that gain all this power and notoriety and ability, like they fall at such a hard and high level. Like the world watches and watches on and on until it becomes corrupted and eventually collapses in evil, horrible disastrousness. So I wanted to just kind of go into people who built empires, old and more current, to just get a perspective on what they did, how it appeared to be, and how it ended. Right? Because at the end of the day, if we're building an empire, it's about us and for us and everything else. And so I'm going, okay, well, if it's about us and for us, well, clearly we should be happy. Clearly it should bring us joy and peace and love and all the things that we really actually want. Should bring us freedom. Like it's the kind of the typical thing, not just biblically, but worldly, is just like, well, what are we really truly after? Right? We're after peace, equanimity, freedom, love, gratitude, all these types of things. Like that's what we're actually after. We're not, the constant chasing of more does not necessarily result in freedom. It does not necessarily result in peace and joy and love and these things, right? So the first one that we were kind of studying into is Alexander the Great. And I'm not going to go way deep into this, but I was reading a quote on this, and basically he had conquered, the majority of the world at the time by age 30, died by age 32. And there's one quote, and I won't read it directly because it's a bit long and convoluted, but basically, they had some thinker at the time had conceptually come up that there were infinite worlds that existed, like ultimate, what do you call it when there's different worlds, like the universes or whatever? Multiverses. They were talking about this concept. And it says that he wept because there's an infinite number of worlds and he hadn't even fully conquered one of them yet. So he's owns and leads and controls the most of our world that any one person ever did in his existence. And he was still miserable because he hadn't conquered enough. And so in that case, he's building an empire that's built around conquering. Like he obviously wanted to conquer everything, and then he wouldn't be happy and satisfied until it was over. He conquered everything reachable, and still he wept. His empire fragmented within a few years of his death.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right. And so I'm going, okay, Alexander the Great, there's all the stories and there's all the conquests and everything else. But, it was short-lived and he was miserable.
Yeah.
Even with all of the conquest, right? So, okay, there's one example. Let's moving on to the next one. Napoleon Bonaparte, again, one of the conquerors of Europe and the world, and won many battles and had many awesome things happen from our perspective or from history. But ultimately, died. Like at the end of it all, he was exiled and died alone. And again, reading another quote that he had said basically towards the end of his life, I marvel that whereas the ambitious dreams of myself, Caesar, and Alexander should have vanished into thin air, but a Judean peasant, Jesus, should be able to stretch his hand across the centuries and control the destinies of men and nations. And so what I read from that is that Napoleon ultimately was looking for influence. He wanted influence. And at the end of the day, it was all stripped from him. And he had basically no influence at the end of his life. the man who conquered Europe, dying on a rock in the South Atlantic, finally admitting that Christ had won.
Yeah.
Right. So again, very interesting perspective, right? Again, I've watched and read about Napoleon and all the things that he did and the rise of that. But, these guys like that built these empires and conquered and warred and had like these massive lives, it just ends with like nothing.
Yeah.
Like unfulfilled. They weren't free. They weren't happy. They didn't have peace. They didn't have joy. They were extremely troubled people. The last one I'll kind of bring up here, there's many, like I've got a list of quite a few more, but
quite a few here.
I've got Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin, but Hitler is one that's a little bit more like current in the perspective of, our generation, understanding what actually happened there. But it's kind of just a repeat of the same story. These guys get it in their mind that they want to go conquer. Alexander the Great was about conquering. Napoleon was about influence. Adolf Hitler was about control. He wanted to control the narrative, control people, control outcomes. And it says here, in an outburst of wild fury followed, in which feelings of bitterness, helplessness, self-pity, and despair mingled. Adolf Hitler died by suicide, April 30th, 1945.
Although I heard he's still alive in Venezuela
at
like 116 years old.
Yeah, Well, I'd love him to call in if he is.
Yes.
We'd do an interview, see how he's feeling now. But yeah, the guy like killed millions, controlled millions, was a conqueror of part, but lived an extremely bitter, helpless, self-pity, and despaired existence. He was constantly upset and angered and stressed. And I'd again, think about freedom, joy, peace.
Yeah.
The thing, love, what we're all looking for. It was, that's not how you would describe the life of Hitler.
No, tortured is how describe it.
Yeah, exactly. And really, I would think all of these men in a roundabout way were tortured. Joseph Stalin said that a man who was terrorized half the world, died terrified, surrounded by people too afraid to help him.
Yeah, it's great.
Right? Like this is what we worked for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, I think that when we're thinking about what we're building and what we're doing as entrepreneurs, business, and again, maybe we don't relate exactly with conquering all of Europe or the world or the Roman Empire or anything of that nature. But when we're building something and we're gaining influence and control and having feelings of conquering and winning in competition, it's important to think about the bigger picture. Of why we're doing what we're doing and what impact it's having on us and on the world. And agreed. I often think, is what I'm doing bringing me joy? Is what I'm doing helping me to have peace? Is what I'm doing allowing me to express the love I have for others and feel the love that others have for me? And in a lot of cases, a lot of entrepreneurs struggle very, very deeply with that, and I've seen it in interviews and calls with other entrepreneurs in our time, men who built amazing big things, but are extremely troubled and have fought their whole lives to be able to connect with their spouses or their kids, don't really know why or how what they've done has actually made anyone's lives better or unable to be great, have gratitude for the experiences that they've had in their life. They're just, again, tortured and troubled. And I take great pause when I see that. And it makes me want to kind of reel back a little bit and go, okay, we idolize some of these people, and really, if we really think deeply about it, we don't actually want their lives that they have.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Nor are we called to that. Right. So I'll go kind of moving on to the next thing is, who are some people who lived lives that built kingdom? And what was it that about their life that made it that way? I didn't necessarily do any of the leaders from our time in that respect, because some of it's yet to be seen. But in the Bible, it really points out to some specific people who lived the way God thought they ought to, or at least in part. I was having a conversation the other day about just biblical people, like the stories of the Bible, and trying to figure out like what to make of your life, or what we want our lives to look like. And it was interesting, you brought this up earlier, the idea of suffering. But there is not a single character or person in the Bible who lived a life that had no suffering.
Yeah.
0%. Right. And so I think that's incredibly telling to us in our expectation of what our lives should be, what we should expect out of our lives, that there is no magic, perfect route that you're going to walk down that has no pain, no suffering, no challenge, no trials. Jesus says we should expect trials. Well, the entire, however many thousands of years covered by the Bible points to that every single meaningful person that ever existed had trials and challenges and health issues and, was discriminated against and all of these various things. And so living a life that God intended and according to our purpose does not exist in a world without trials and troubles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so we should expect it. And that is part of the process that we're going to go through. One of the big ones that's often talked about is David, King David. It says, and people often repeat, a man after God's own heart. But what really was kind of pointed out to me in another podcast I was listening to, that they were discussing David and his existence, is that he was sold out for the glorification of God's name. And it really is pointed out well, kind of when he comes in to fight Goliath, the David and Goliath story. What really drove him to fight Goliath was not his own glorification. It wasn't so that he could become king. He was supposed to get the king's daughter's hand in marriage from that, but he had already decided he was going to do it before that. And when he's outraged, he's not even part of the battle. He comes into the story, and the Philistine Goliath is cursing God's name publicly in front of the Israelites, God's people. And he's outraged and surprised that the king and the entire army is not offended on God's behalf for what he's saying. Basically saying that God's dead and that he doesn't have any power and that they're weak and powerless and whatever. And so David's decision to fight Goliath is completely predicated on the fact that he is going out to honor God's name and prove that he's wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that paints a pretty good picture of the life of David, and what makes people say a man after God's own heart is that the majority of what David did in his life was not about building David's kingdom and making his name great, but he always went back to making God's name great and making sure that, when they would go into battle, he would ask God what God wanted. When he would win a battle, he would follow God's specific rulings on as to what should be done after that. And he would glorify, he would worship, he would the point of David's life is that he would continually point the Israelites and the people around him and the people he conquered back to God.
Yeah.
At that time. Right. And it doesn't mean that David was perfect. Obviously, there's the Bathsheba story where he sees a woman, wants her for himself, ends up killing her husband, and does a lot of things that aren't glorifying to God. But the interesting part, as at those times, David, when called out, would immediately go to repentance. He would repent, and he would repent hard. And
he made a few songs about it.
Yeah, and when he wrote all the Psalms and whatever else, Psalm, I got this one written down, Psalm 51:10, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me, which is, again, commonly known in Christian circles, but it is his heart posture. It's just like, hey, I'm human. I'm going to do wrong things. He did plenty of stupid things. And it was, a pretty raw, angry person in a lot of the stories as you read through them. But
and there was punishment attached to that stuff too.
And there was definitely negatives that came out of it, but he had a repentant heart, and he always came back around to that it's about God, it's not about me. Right. And he lived a really beautiful life, and it points to him being, having moments of suffering and sadness and all these kinds of, but also extremely moments of the height of joy and peace and freedom and all kinds of other great things. Like if you go through the life of David and you look at it, the experiences of his life included suffering and challenge, but a good majority of his life was tied to being within his purpose, being where he ought to be, and being like right filled to the brim with joy and peace and freedom and all the things that we're ultimately looking for. And so I think there's a lot of things to take from the life of David. But the main point that I'm trying to point to here is that he was sold out for building the kingdom of God. Next, I kind of move on to Solomon, which is David's son, considered the wealthiest and wisest man ever to live. I'm sure I've brought him up multiple times over the course of our podcast. One of my favorite biblical characters. But the same sort of thing. He built God's temple. That's one thing he was called to do. When God offered him anything, he asked for wisdom and the ability to lead the people well and point them towards God, which he did for a long time. But his life is also a cautionary tale because it like David, but maybe to more of an extreme, it went from at a very young age understanding the purpose of building kingdom to shifting to building his own empire towards the end of his life, and then him going into depths of despair and being taken astray, and ultimately dying a little bit in disgrace because he built things for other gods. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines and had foreign gods and built his empire up far beyond and in the exact way that God told him not to. Yeah. Right. And so it kind of shows the difference between, hey, blessed, God's kingdom is being glorified, blessing, blessing, blessing. Oh, I'm going to shift to building my empire now. No blessing. Right. And despair and a life that is fragmented and broken. Yeah.
Well, and some people think that maybe Solomon wrote Ecclesiastes as well.
So for sure parts of it, yeah.
A person who writes Ecclesiastes,
meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Yeah, I often read Ecclesiastes just to be reminded that other people have felt despair. When I'm in that melancholy mood. But I have a verse here from Ecclesiastes written down 2:10 and 11. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired, yet when I surveyed all my hands had done, and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind, nothing was gained under the sun. So, when I denied myself nothing my eyes desired, I am now building my empire and not focusing on God's kingdom. And it ends in despair. Right. Yeah. So it's that kind of dichotomy and a clear showing of the difference of the two.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, again, very telling, pointing me into the way that I decide to go about living my life and being reminded that there are many footholds and stumbling blocks that exist that we can get drug into if we don't continually check ourselves to make sure that we're pointing people to God's kingdom, and we're building God's kingdom for God's purpose and not for our own purposes. Yeah. I think you brought this up earlier in discussion too, is being a visionary is often something that's tied to entrepreneurs and business and those types of things. And I think, it says without vision, the people perish. Vision is a God-given thing, and it can be an extremely powerful thing. People need to know where they're going and that there's purpose and a future ahead of them, or else they lose heart. But at the same time, vision gets misconstrued in society and in business and entrepreneurship in that it's a vision of what we want, right? It's an empire vision or a kingdom vision, right? And so clarifying a vision to make sure that it's not one that is just a self-serving vision, but a vision that is for the benefit of God's kingdom and one that is given and not self-created. Yeah. Right. So it's a really good thing to talk about or think about too.
It really goes back to, you really need to be focused on God and in connection with him every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Multiple times a day. Yeah. If not all the time.
Absolutely. Gifts, success, even God's given wisdom won't protect you from drift. Your daily walk does. Solomon stopped walking and his empire ate him alive.
Yeah.
Which is, very telling.
I like to liken this kind of thing with God actually having his cone of protection over us, his hand of protection over us when we're glorifying him, going back to the quote that we started with, and that once we start deviating, he's just like, oh, you can keep doing what you want to do. If you want to keep building your empire, by all means, keep doing it. I'm not going to protect you anymore. And the entropy of the world will just wipe it away. And the world does what the world does. And it just takes brick by brick away from your kingdom and just says, yeah, guess what? This isn't.
Well, and I think there's another layer to that, which is that your kingdom, like it says, his empire ate him alive. You know, it's not necessarily that they'll take the money away. It's not necessarily that everything that visually looks big and powerful and awesome from the outside will be what is lost. What is lost is the joy and the peace. And the purpose. Like the torturedness of the people. It's like, okay, well, what being inside of God's purpose and following his vision comes with the gifts that only come from him, which are joy, peace, patience, like the gifts of God, the spiritual gifts. Well, when you're not operating inside of the kingdom and for the good of the kingdom, those fruits are not bared by what you're doing. Yeah. Right. And so they disappear. It pushes us into a place that we don't want to be. Right. And it is such a funny thing because it doesn't matter like how much you have, how much more you have. The human condition is an internal one. It's a mental one. It's a spiritual one. And that we have feelings. We have, like our ultimate benefit or the thing that we want to experience is not measured in how many gold coins we've collected. It's not enough for us, right? That's not how we were built, which is, again, the importance of understanding being built, being created, that our creator created us for a reason and he knows what we need and what we want and what is fulfilling and uplifting to us. And when it's not a car or a pile of money or power or land or any of these things, that actually isn't enough.
Exactly.
Right.
And or a new 3D printer.
Yeah, or a new 3D printer. Yeah, like not that we don't want those things, and not that they're actually inherently bad, but when they become centric, we then can't understand why we can't find joy and why we can't find peace and happiness, because it's not given by those things. They are not God.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. The last kind of biblical character that I wanted to touch on is Job, and I like his story because it's so different than anything else you read, the Kings and all that kind of stuff. But just the story of Job just simply is that he was a very wealthy and prominent man, and he actually did live more or less perfectly within the eyes of God, but everything was stripped from him to prove a point via Satan, essentially, for God's purpose. And again, this brings up the conversation you and I were kind of having earlier, in that our suffering is not necessarily tied into our redemption or our learning and everything else. Sometimes suffering is for other purposes that we don't understand. And that God's picture and vision and purpose is not always tied to what our picture and perspective and vision is, right? The thing about Job that is such a powerful story is how, despite losing everything, literally everything, his wealth, his family, his health, that he didn't curse God in the end. He didn't leave God's side. He continued to focus in, to lean in, and to walk with God and for God's purpose, even despite all that. And it was all returned to him twice as much and double in the end, but it didn't change his heart posture. Yeah. Having double didn't make him happier.
Yeah. And that's not to say that he didn't struggle, that he didn't cry out to God, that his friends weren't being total jerks to him.
Yeah. Everything
he was
bad.
A jerk back to them, and he would challenge them. They would challenge him. He would challenge God. God would challenge him. But in the end, he's like, God, you're sovereign.
Yeah.
I don't question anything you're doing.
Which conceptually is kind of almost Solomon in reverse, is that, he had what appeared to be an empire, but he was about kingdom. Yeah. And so when the empire crumbled, he did not change who he was and where his allegiances lied, and what direction he knew he needed to go to get to where he wanted to be in his freedom and his joy and his peace and all those things. And so, again, Job 1 verse 21, I think, is one that I think a lot about, and it says, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And saying that in the depths of his despair, at the very bottom of the trench of his loss and his pain and his suffering and his struggle, he realized that still it's about God and his kingdom and his purpose, and that we as humans are not God. But we do need to continue to lean in and to focus on what God's purpose is and the direction he's taken us and why he's taken us there, because it is ultimately for our good.
Yeah.
Right. So, kingdom is about Christ. Empire is about selfish ambition. And so when we're thinking about our next steps or our vision or the direction we're going, we need to make sure we're using that kind of litmus test as to the purpose behind where we're going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Main thing here is what are the things that we can do to make sure we stay focused as leaders, as entrepreneurs, as men, women. How do we keep our walking in the right direction, and not get sidetracked with the things that we shouldn't? So one of those things is to make sure that we are checking what our personal mission is. What is the thing we're called to do? And a calling comes from a creator. I think that's important to understand, is just that the world can point us and distract us with all kinds of shiny things and exciting things, and other humans, friends, family can direct us towards what they think is best for us. But at the end of the day, our calling comes from our creator. And so that means that we need to stay connected and focused on what we're being called to do, and listening and seeing for that.
Well, can I just give an example quickly of this? And sometimes I think as Christians, we like to say calling, and we might think that it's something huge, and it's something, but it's very often, in my experience anyway, very often something that's very small. And as an example, when I was going for lunch one day, I was like, I'm going for lunch and I'm going to pray. That's my goal. God's called me to pray. I'm going to go pray. I was on my way. Someone cut me off and said, "Hey, Tyler, how are you doing?" I'm like, I'm good. But in my head, I'm like, you're interrupting me. I'm going to pray. And they kept talking to me. And it was through that conversation where I was like, oh, God's actually calling me to be God for this person, or like to introduce this person to Jesus Christ, so that they can experience the closeness to Jesus that I experience. And so it was in that moment where I was like, this is my calling right now. It's not a big thing. It's 20 minutes. But God's saying, hey, put off the prayer with me and pray with this person. And so just as an encouragement, that sometimes the calling isn't the huge.
Yeah, everyone wants to be able to write their calling up on a wall and create a sign and a shrine around it or something like that. But it's not, calling is and there's a personal mission kind of level of calling, and then there's the day-to-day calling. And it comes down to the walk that we're talking about. It's like, how do I walk open-minded to whatever God calls me to, and literally be listening at all times to that. It's not an easy thing at all. Like the world, the enemy, everyone's trying to distract us at every corner and every turn and every moment. Every time your phone bings, and every social media thing that can keep you strolling like there, it's all trying to distract you. The world is generating constant distraction, especially in our age. And to hear God's voice gets ever more challenging. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so how do we continue to focus in? Spending time in the Word. I think it's incredibly important, that we are in the Bible. A lot of the directing of myself back onto the path comes from my reading the Bible consistently, right? There's a lot of input, a lot of opinions, and a lot of places to get content and thoughts and ideas from. And I'm not discounting that there's a lot of good stuff out there, but the Bible is really, truly the living Word of God. And it is what can be used to test every other bit of content and stuff that there's out there. So being able to walk with God means being committed to being in His Word. Staying connected to our Creator, praying, listening, being attentive, not being focused on ourselves constantly. It's a big piece of that as well. I've talked a lot about that in other podcasts as well, but just knowing that you're created and a Creator has a purpose for you, and He wants to connect. That's the point.
Yeah.
right? So if he wants to connect and we're willing to want to connect and make time for it, we'll get connected.
Yeah. That's always the thing that I just love it. I love that he wants to connect with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we all, in our own way, it's sometimes hard to relate to it, but we want to be wanted. We want to be pursued. And so does God. And that's how he created it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a good thing. So leaning into that is wise and is good. Another great one is gratitude, having an attitude of gratitude, understanding that every breath is a gift. And just the thing is about gratitude is that you can't both be depressed and self-focused and grateful at the same time. So combating some of the anxiety and depression that exists in our world, it's like this physical science proves that our brain cannot physically experience gratitude and depression at the same time. So it's just a natural break from that. And so this is why a lot of the biblical principles that we read about and think about and are about worshiping, praising, uplifting. It's all forms of gratitude, which God created us to worship and to be in a state of gratitude because he knows it's healthy for how we were created, right? He built us that way.
Yeah, it's a willful action.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's great. Sometimes God redirects us when we won't. So much like your story that you just told, understanding that if you have committed and submitted yourself to God, that you've allowed him the authority to step in and change direction. And sometimes that looks like suffering. Sometimes that looks like something that we don't want or don't think, we don't perceive. It doesn't align with what we think our vision or picture of what we're supposed to be doing is. But being submitted to God allows him to redirect you. And again, being sensitive to that's what's happening, and then it's not something that's bad.
Yeah.
Being open to the redirection of God and his purpose and what he's trying to do. These are all great things to help keep us focused on our walk, right? So personal mission, time in the Word, staying connected to our created, being in a state of gratitude, serving and giving. Another one I missed there. Tim Tebow, in a recent interview I listened to him, was talking about how he can get really down on himself. Sometimes he's a competitor, football, NFL star for a lot of years, comes from a very competitive sports related family. And so, moments of losing is not something he experiences very often, but when he does, he really struggles with it. And so he was talking about how a friend and him have a internal rule between the two of them is if they're getting down on themselves or they're struggling with something that sucks or a loss or something they deem to be unfair, that they challenge each other to serve. And that's how they get themselves out of that headspace.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Right. And he says, and I've never, ever had a scenario where I was feeling defeated or down or lost or not understanding where I didn't go and serve and get immediately pulled out of that headspace. Being created to serve and going out and serving and uplifting others is again, one of the things that we were massively created for. Yeah. And so, I know for myself, we can get really closed in on our own situation and our own challenges, and forget that the people close to us and around us have their own challenges and their own things, and we ourselves need help to get out of the places that we are in, and so do others. And by helping one another, we help ourselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I see a theme in all those things.
Yeah.
It's kind of a rejection of navel gazing. That there's. Not that self-focus isn't necessary sometimes, but there's a place for it, and there's actually a bigger place for focusing on others.
Yeah. I know for myself, like clockwork, the more success, I don't know what you want to call it, that I have, the more financial gain I have, the more ability I have to focus on my own happiness and benefits. Like when you're busy booking your holiday or looking on Marketplace for the next thing you want to buy, or you need the next big thing, the more of that I have time to do and end up doing, the more down spiraling my mood, my attitude, my demeanor becomes. If I'm going, man, I just feel like garbage, man, and nothing seems to be making me happy, man. Like I'm in a melancholy state. What's going on with me? I can almost always point it back to, oh, you've been being self-focused, You're focused on what you want. You're focused on your empire, the thing that you're wanting to do. You're not thinking about God's kingdom.
Yeah.
You're not thinking about others who need help. You're not finding a way to be meaningful and purposeful with your time and your space. You're not serving your wife and your kids, because if you were, you wouldn't feel this way.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the facts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a consistent rhythm for me that I find myself. It's a trigger. It's absolutely pointing to the fact that you're off track somehow.
Yeah, I find that if I sit on the couch and I, start playing, I have these mind games that I play on the phone. I start playing that and my daughter comes over and says, "Hey, Dad, put that down and come do something with me." I know right away, if my mind isn't in the right spot, that if I just don't go, "Oh, that's awesome," or if I go, "Oh, this is my time.
Mm-hmm.
This is my time to cool down, chill, get out of my face," then I'm like, "Oh, I'm exactly what you're talking about. I'm focusing too much on my kingdom.
Yeah.
And my kingdom is my time." So,
well, and I think I'd ask myself, if I'm trying to kind of like wrestle with this concept, who do I know who I would consider extremely selfish? And then I would go, okay, do I find that person is happy or miserable generally?
mm-hmm.
And
That's
simply
good, yeah.
put, and it's like, okay, well, the most selfish people I know are the most miserable people I know.
Yeah.
And
That's, yeah.
and go think, okay, who's the most selfless person I know that just always willing to help and always giving up for themselves? It's like, I'm not going to say that they don't get burnt out or they have moments of challenge, but are those people generally joyful, happy, free-minded people?
Mm-hmm.
And my personal answer to that is absolutely. The people who often have the least and give the most are the happiest people I know,
Mm-hmm.
the most joyful.
A lot of data backs that up too.
Oh yeah, like there's, again, you can dig deeper into that, but I think for each person individually, if you just check those questions of
Mm-hmm.
yourself, it'll point you to the answer on its own. Right?
Absolutely.
Which is great.
I like that.
And it's what the kingdom calls us to do. Yeah, I think we've talked about a lot of things. There's, pain points, pain alleviators, mindset. I just want to recap some of the perspectives that we've crossed here. Like, again, to the very beginning of this, God will not bless the advancement of any other kingdom than his. Your creator has a vision and a plan, and he has a purpose and a place for you in that, but it's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
And when you make it about you, it will not be blessed. When you make it about him, you'll make progress and you'll go somewhere that results ultimately in blessing, which is joy, peace, fulfillment, all the things that you want. What is it to be blessed? It is to be joyful. It is to be free-minded. It is to be peaceful. And those are gifts that come from God. That is what blessing is. And the world doesn't have that for you.
Yeah.
Only your creator does. We see through the empire builders, the people over history and through society who really seem to have the most ability to conquer and to have control and build their own empires, that are known for that through hundreds of years, were miserable and died alone, sad and horrible, tortured existences. And I don't know that there's any entrepreneur leader anywhere who's looking for that outcome.
Right.
But you'll get it if that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
The people who lived lives that were filled with peace and fulfillment and joy, some of the biblical situations we talked about, they lived lives that were focused on what God wanted, not just for them, but for the people that they led. And they resulted in positive lives ultimately. Or at least lives that had a lot of moments of fulfillment and greatness in them. And I think, again, there is no scenario where we live in this constant state of bliss for the rest of our existence, but there are a lot of ways to enjoy moments of deep, deep peace and deep fulfillment, and to get to the end of our lives surrounded by people we love, and having people who would show up at our funeral to say how we'd impacted their lives in a great way. And that is the legacy that we want to leave, not one that's about us, but about all the people that we benefited by existing, by fulfilling our purpose and our calling from our creator. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I think it's important that we have a mindset that it's not about us and it's about the kingdom of God and about the calling that we're meant to do. I think that it's important we understand that how we were created was created to fulfill that purpose and to serve others and to uplift and impact the world in a way that is like Jesus impacted it. And in so doing that selflessly, we ultimately take care of ourselves. And when we're going about our business and about our leadership and the things that we're doing, that we make sure that we are not building our own empires. And when we're feeling the pressure and the weight and the melancholy that comes from building our entrepreneur journey and following the way that the world points us to go, that we take a moment to check ourselves and make sure that we can reroute ourselves back in the right direction towards building God's kingdom, building up our communities, building up our families and the people around us, to know that's going to get us to the end that we're ultimately looking for.
Yeah. That's great. That's great, Jordan.
Cool. God only blesses the advancement of his own kingdom and not of our empire. Well, that's all I got for today. Appreciate you.
A lot to chew on.
Yeah, there's lots to chew on. It's pretty deep stuff. And I won't sit here and say that I've got that all figured out. I'm preaching this to myself as much as anybody else. And so, I'll probably be listening through this for my own benefit later as well. But I hope it's meaningful to you. I hope that it helps point you in a direction. I hope when you're struggling and stumbling around in the dark, that this can point a light towards the direction that you need to go to get out of that. And I hope that it's ultimately a blessing to whomever's listening. So appreciate you checking in with us, and we'll continue to try and make awesome content that helps you be the best leader you can. Thanks for joining us on Built to Lead.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.